So I can go, oh, so you can go much farther and much longer, and it's much easier. So E, nice and long and fast. Ah, slow and really difficult. Okay? So once again, this idea of demonstrating it away from the clarinet with things like this is very simple and very effective. I think this kind of thing sticks with students. And then later on in their lessons down the road, if they're drawing their tongue, I can bring this back. No, not this. This. And it usually works very well as a reminder. Sometimes I use pictures too. These are some MRI scans of the head and a sagittal plane. And knowing what we know about this Venturi effect, that fluid moving through a smaller aperture has greater speed. And if we look at these three pictures, we have an ah on the left, an oo in the middle, and an e on the far right. Knowing what you know, which one do you think would give you the fastest air? The e, right? I mean, I think that's pretty. Oh, you're right. There. The oo is high in the back as well, but it's too far away from where the reed is. The reed is very forward in the mouth. So the oo, even though it's high in the back, by the time it gets to the front, you've lost any speed gains you might have made because it's so far away from the reed. And then I'll have them do some kind of long tone practice. I think we all have 100 different ways to practice long tones. I think what's most important is that they be expressive. I think so often as we play long tones on the clarinet, you just play you just sort of hold the note. You get this kind of doorbell sound. On and off. It's kind of mechanical and it's not at all what we want. So whatever kinds of long tones you do, I would just encourage you to make them somehow musical. So here, when I do these long tones, I like to have some kind of a shape. Crescendoing into the 12th, the crescendoing as you add the register key, once again goes towards building confidence and leaning against the resistance of the clarinet. You might have some students do this kind of thing, and of course they'll get R squeak. And squeak is okay. Have them hold the squeak. Most of us, I think, when we squeak, we stop right away. We kind of stop. I think what we want to do is actually encourage our students to sit on the squeak, to feel the squeak and feel what that feels like, and then fix it. And when we do that, when we confront it directly, it becomes much less of a boogie. We're much less afraid of it, like so many things in life, right? You really confront it directly, it becomes less daunting. All right, so knowing what we know, how do we fold these principles into our practice? Several different ways. Harmonic long tones that we talked about is one useful technique. You recall demonstrating the effect of the oral cavity shaping with the tuner in the mouth. I think is a very good technique. And you can demonstrate the effect of the bottom lip on the piano string. It works really well. You play the piano and move your finger up and down the string. You can also, a good way to do it is have your students whistle the first 4 notes of Joy to the World. The Christmas Carol, not the $3 night version, right?
Yes.
Try that. 7th, 5th, 3rd, first part. More or less. Yeah? I think that's a good way to introduce your students to this feeling without sticking your fingers in their mouth. Now, this is the basic rule of voicing, and to me, this is the crux of the whole thing. If we can do this very simple thing, we can fix not just speaking, but a lot of our other issues in playing the clarinet. You have to voice the partial of your finger. It's really as simple as that. If you're fingering a 5th partial note, you want to voice a 5th partial note. If you're fingering a 7th partial note, you want to voice a 7th partial note. Now, of course, there are occasions in 20th century music where you do just the opposite to get a multiphonic. But for the most part, you want to voice the partial you're fingering And a lot of the problems on the clarinet magically disappear. It's kind of amazing. If a player fingers, for instance, if you finger a third partial and you voice the first, you get a grunt. So if I'm once again going back to our Weber concertina, it's often the first note that you hear when you have your students. It kind of starts with that kind of a grunt. So that's me. I'm fingering third partial, but I'm voicing first. And this is the clarinet's way. This is the clarinet talking to me. The clarinet is saying, you're fingering third, but you're voicing first. I don't know what you want. I'll give you both. Right? And you get, for most of them, a little more fun. Yes?
The same thing with trumpet. You have to keep a certain having a mouth.
Yeah.
Like G, but you're too open, so you're playing C.
Yeah. Oh, I think so.
He just told me about it. Wait a second.
Oh, cool. Yeah, there's some, I'm discovering all these similarities that are really interesting. And then if I finger third and voice fifth, I get, yes, our squeak. This is our squeak. I'm not voicing the partial of that finger. So it's really as simple as that. Now I'd like to just apply it to a few excerpts and then take some questions. So I took some pieces from the repertoire and showed you how I would have students work through these. So normally what I do, if a student has an awkward passage, I'll have them write it out underneath in first partial. So that first note, our B flat, if I take off the register key, I get first line E flat. That's the first partial note. So I can play that whole top line. I can play it all in first partial. So the first partial would sound like. This exercise is relatively simple in that it's all in one, it's all in the same partial. So I would have the student finger the bottom notes and just using their voicing and using their air, pop it up into the right partial. It gets trickier as you get lower. But they learn a lot from doing that. Obviously, the pitch is not going to be quite right because we've closed one of the vents, but it's not so much the pitch that we're listening for as the keeping it in the right partial. So there's a simple example. It's all third partial, and that's a good way to practice it. Here's another one from Debussy Rhapsody that goes between third and fifth partial. Now, when we're going from fifth to third, when we're going from 5 nodes of vibration to 3 nodes, we're slowing down. And you might want a little bit of a kind of or E-ah, like a donkey. E-ah, E-ah, kind of thing when we're coming down. To get it to come down. And then we're going back up. When I'm going from third to fifth, I might want to speed up the air a little bit to get it going because it has to vibrate. Instead of 3 notes, it has to have 5 notes of vibration. It takes more energy. Now, just knowing that, just knowing where do I relax and where I speed up, fixes a lot of problems. I find a lot of students play this kind of stuff and they don't know what partial they're coming from or what partial they're coming through. So with a little bit of practice, pen and paper and staff paper, you really learn a lot. So here in the Debussy, if I play all those top notes in first partial, if I play them in first partial, it sounds like. Very foreign sounding and weird. Then the last step would be I'd have the students do that, what I just did, and then not using the register keys, just using their voicing, pop it up into the correct partial. And you learn a lot. Obviously, it's out of tune, it doesn't sound great, but you learn a lot inside your mouth in terms of what you need to do to get those notes to come out. Then, when you go back to playing it as written, much easier. It just seems much smoother and much more simple. Going on, increasing in complexity. Here's an excerpt from Stravinsky's 3 Pieces, where you go very rapidly back and forth between third and fifth partial. So in first partial, a lot. So here, going back and forth between third and fifth very rapidly, what the student learns is they want to find something right in the middle so that they can negotiate both of those partials more rapidly. Here's an example from Weber's Clarinet Quintet. This is the climactic moment of the Weber Quintet. And here, especially important, if we look at the circled notes, those two notes, the E and the A, have exactly the same finger. So here's a place where playing the clarinet is precisely like playing a brass instrument. I have no register key to put down. I've already put it down. There's nothing I can do. I have to just do it with my face. So if I play the top line as written, okay, and then first partial. So I would have the students play those first partial notes. And we have to do it all with our mouth. So this is a great example of why we do all this kind of practice that we do. And then Copeland Concerto. So this is a lick from the Cadenza and Copeland Concerto. Most clarinet players know. And at first it can look very daunting, but if you break it down into the partials, it's actually not so scary. Yeah, okay. I can play with it. But doing this is very illuminating. You take something that looks very difficult and very daunting, you break it down, and you realize it's not as scary as you thought. It's controlled squeaking is what it is, right? So I think the moral of all of this is don't play flar. I used to work with Elaine DuVos, oboe teacher at Juilliard. She used to complain that all her students played flar. They would bite, or they wouldn't support the air enough so they'd be flat, but they would bite so they'd be sharp. So you get something in the middle, what you call flar. And I think a lot of clarinet players tend to play flar. So doing this kind of practice eliminates the squeak and eliminates this kind of flar playing.
Yeah.
And that's the end of my lecture. Do you folks have any questions I might answer in the last couple of minutes? Any thoughts? Questions, criticisms, comments? Yes.